So I guess we do the pledge first. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I think we need a motion to appoint me as acting chair for purposes of this meeting.
I'll make that motion.
And I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. So then we have the old business. Oh, does anyone need a copy of I have copies of the agenda for anyone who needs it. Old business are approval of the minutes of November 8 and November 6. Both of them have previously been circulated to the members. Are there any comments, changes?
2 typo errors that I corrected, and we'll submit them tomorrow when Margaret's back tomorrow.
Okay. Motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve them.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. So then the NRI CSC update, final to be presented to town board in January. Margaret circulated a very complete document with very complete maps. Lots of thanks to Shannon, among others on the team that put that together. Anything in particular we should be looking at when we're reading it?
Right now, I think the biggest kind of open-ended parts are making sure that the pictures have captions, the figures and maps are tied to the text
Okay.
appropriately.
I've read about half of it and wasn't really sure what I should be reading for. I didn't see anything wrong. It looked terrific, just terrific. And I think will be a wonderful document for us to use to get some critical environmental areas enacted or adopted or whatever. Because in my mind, that would be the next step.
Yeah, I think it has everything in one place is really going to be, it's huge value to the town, I think.
Well, thank you.
Proud of your work.
Very, very good. I mean, this has been a long time coming, and the CAC will hopefully have a lot to do with taking it to the next step, and we're actually doing something with it to protect the towns.
Have they gotten the GIS information from Nan? Is that part of that?
All of the GIS work that
The
have been
actual
done
files?
before they had acquired, and a lot of it's actually, if there wasn't something newer, it's part of the maps that were now recreated.
She had said that she would supply the GIS data for the maps for whoever was going to do that. And not going to be me, but whoever.
No, so somebody did it, yeah. And I'm blanking on his name right now. But
No, the data, the hardcore computer data. Did you do that? You found that?
he acquired it and used it. I don't know
No.
where the hard
She
data
said,
are.
let me try to be a little clearer. She said that along with the maps, she would supply the hardcore computer GIS data that a person who knows how to do GIS will be able to use with her maps.
And yes, he did get that data and used it to make new maps.
No, do we have it? She said we
The
would have it.
CAC,
Not the CAC, the town would have it.
Cornell Cooperative has it. I don't know if the town has it as well.
Well,
I don't know the answer to that.
I think the town should have it, assuming some new people come in who are talented in that area, that would be available for them to use. And for example, on the clear form that's coming up a little bit later in the presentation, it would be nice if somebody could make an overlay of various things that are on that property that were not presented to anybody. A person with GIS skills, like Cornell Cooperative, we may have some new people coming in who could do that too. And it would be a good tool for somebody who could do that at town level to have all the time. We used to have them, older ones, there's no reason why and she said we would get them. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Margaret may very well know the answer to that.
Now, Nan said that, I am positive she said it, because I asked her that question. So that's something that maybe we have to follow up on if we don't have it. That's my comment on, in other words, a well-done job, but that's just a comment that, as an addition. So,
So the next item of old business is the wetlands law proposed amendments. Susan Meany had circulated a draft memo that that proposed some technical amendments to the wetlands law. And at the last meeting, I was tasked with reviewing the memo and reporting back as to my reading. There's a copy of the memo here if you need it. There are three sets of changes that are in the memo, and I had an opportunity to discuss
Okay, thank you, Howard.
the
proposed amendments with Emily Abrams, who's a planning board member, to get a little bit more context. The purpose of the first set of changes is to substitute is to put the language that's in a definition into the text of the law itself to avoid confusion with similar terminology in SECRA. That's what the purpose is stated here on the first page. And if you trace it through, that's exactly what is happening. So there really is no substantive change. So then the question becomes, why bother to do that? And apparently it avoids reading in SECRA into our local zoning code. So I think that's something that the planning board thinks is important. I think it's fine. The next change really is not a change, and this is on the third page. The purpose of the change is to make clear what was originally stated but was confusing. The applicant must show that there is no reasonable alternative only when the planning board finds that the proposed activity substantially alters or impairs the natural functions or benefits of a regulated area. If you dig through the original, the current language, that is in fact what it provides. It takes a long time to get there, but it basically, unless you have a substantial impairment of a wetland, you don't even get into this section at all, and that's what they're trying to say. So I think I might suggest a little bit of language to take out the specific reference to the planning board, but otherwise, I think that's what I think the changes really do track what is in fact there. So I might have a little bit of wordsmithing, but otherwise I think it's what they say it is. The final set of changes is on the last two pages. And this is arguably something more than a technical change. They're proposing to add the concept of a minor wetland permit, which would allow the planning board to consider smaller projects on a simplified basis. And the concern that the planning board raised is that without something like this, there are small projects which a homeowner might not even bother to bring to the planning board. They just might go ahead and do. And the example that I think both of us thought of was a storage shed that that might be holding chemicals that could be dangerous if the shed were placed too close to the wetlands.
I'm going to cough, excuse me.
And what this process does is by simplifying it, the theory is that it will encourage more people to come forward rather than just going ahead and building a structure that's non-compliant. So that is the thinking. I think that it would need to be administered very carefully, and perhaps examined after a year or so to see if it's really achieving the function of improving compliance rather than the opposite, because it seems to have been proposed with good intent, but I think it's the kind of thing where it will need to be monitored to see what happens. I don't think we want to discourage creative experimentation if this will allow the planning board to see more projects rather than fewer projects. So that's.
Did you feel like the language about how they were going to designate a small kind of fast-paced project versus?
I think the intent was good, but I think we need, perhaps maybe our comments could be to make sure that it really is minor, that there's and that there's opportunity for oversight. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, they say what this minor projects are. I just didn't know if that was considered enough.
Yeah.
Because it kind of says they won't be major.
But maybe need more definition around what's minor.
Something other than they will not be major.
Yeah.
But they do say they won't involve tree clearing or drainage. A little more specific, but so yeah, I just don't know if there are examples of what would be a case for that bifurcation of fast pace, fast track versus full review. The examples they list seem absolutely appropriate.
But
They're just,
but maybe I want to be more specific.
I'm sure everyone would love to be in the minor wetland category. Presumably, one of the things that will be conveyed with a minor wetland permit will be that it will be a cheaper, faster process, right? So
Right.
I think that it would behoove the planning board to have it very clear so that they're not getting pressured to consider things that should not be minor.
So I think does it make sense to write a one-page letter to this effect?
I think you should remove the planning board as an agency that makes the first decisions. I think your section back, I've been around the planning boards a lot.
So,
And their competency varies quite a bit.
so I think they also have a procedural issue, because when is there going to be a finding? I think they might get.
Well, in other words, what I was trying to get at, if the applicant really wants something, they have to come up with a reason, first of all, why And it should be their responsibility.
Mhm.
Not like I want to be 20 feet closer so I can see the rock better from the window. I mean, they have to come up with real solutions if they want to do that. And not the planning will say, oh, well, we can see the rock from the window 20 feet closer.
So my suggested change would be to say if the proposed regulate.
No, it's not that the applicant has to come up with reasons why it
Right.
has to be there.
Mhm.
And then the planning board has to evaluate the reasons afterward in terms of the wetlands, not the other way around. And it may not even be the planning board that does the evaluation. It may have to be a skilled expert that does the evaluation.
So,
In other words, leave it pretty much the way it's said, that the applicant has to come up with a reason. And then the planning board normally gets somebody to look at it afterward and say, well, yes, it has to be there, and yes or no, it does things to the environment. This is, where Steve Marino normally would come in that process. I'm just a little leery about the planning board making decisions, and some of them are very good at things, but the environment may not be their specialty.
so
Just redline it.
the issue is that the current language allows the planning board to make that determination.
After the applicant comes up with the reason, unless I'm reading it wrong.
Well, so that's the point, is that the
In other words, it forces the applicant to take a little bit of responsibility for what they want to do in writing. Say, I have to have it here because,
but then ultimately the planning board has to agree with that,
Yeah, but-
with the applicant.
but not the other way around, that the planning board already basically okays the project and says to the applicant, come up with a reason why you can't put it elsewhere after. That's a little less, definitive. A general comment that most of you were there, David might remember it. When this thing first came about years ago, and they got to the end of it, and they were going to put it into law, they hired a consultant to look it over, who was familiar with wetland applications and so on. The consultant said this is I think he said he worked for Rye Brook, another town. He said, compared to the town I worked with, this is a very weak wetland law. The other town fights tooth and nail for every inch of it.
So,
And the consultant this is the interesting part, they hired that consultant afterwards for this town. That consultant who said he felt it was a relatively weak wetland law compared to some other places, not all of them, but compared to the ones he was familiar with, Steve Marino.
so the way it works is that first there has to be a finding that the proposed activity substantially alters or impairs the natural functions of a regulated area. And if the project is in that category, then the applicant has to show that there's no reasonable alternative.
Something like that. The applicant has to take the first initial steps. I want to do this. I can't do this anywhere else. You, the planning board, have to allow me to do it here for X, Y reasons.
So what they're getting at here is the number of cases that the applicant has to make that showing. The applicant needs to make that showing not on any project, but only where the proposed activity substantially alters or impairs the natural functions. That's the issue, is that there are categories of wetlands permits that are not involving a substantial alteration or impairing the natural functions of a regulated area. And it's in those cases where the applicant doesn't have to show that there's no reasonable alternative.
Well, actually, the applicant has to prove why he has to do it there first, and then all of that comes in. So you can or cannot do it there. It's the applicant that is driving the application.
Mm-hmm. So first the applicant has to show that first the planning board somebody has to find that the activity is going to substantially alter or impair the natural functions of a regulated area. The applicant isn't going to, the applicant's not going to say that, right? I mean, the applicant probably isn't going to concede that. It's the regulator, the planning board, that has to say, look, there's going to be a substantial impairment. And then the applicant says, but there's no reasonable alternative.
On the application, they just check off, yes, this is near a wetland. Like that's all the applicant.
And look to put how many feet.
Right, so they just check off the like actual distances and that, yes, it's within the buffer or not. And then is it ever designated as the new definition, impaired and not functioning without a consultant?
No, not that I know of.
I think that was my concern with the new fast track, is that one of the reasons you can't be on the fast track is if it is designated as likely to be an impaired function, and they're not going to know that unless they've already done the slower track, which is to get the consultant involved.
Right.
Unless the law is actually saying this next part where they said they will have a specific defined list of projects, blah, 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 including a swing set on a lawn or anything on an area that was already lawn. So I think the clarification around whether or not there's a assessment of some sort before they fast track it, or if it's just, if there was already lawn there, they're going to fast track it. And who makes that decision? Because the way this reads, it looks like the applicant's going to be able to check off, I want to be fast tracked.
Well, I think the idea, not said boldly in type, but is discourage people from doing things in the wetlands if there are other options available. Because you want to preserve the wetland. I think the function here, for the most part, is not, oh, I own this property, I want to do things. I think the function of this law was originally for the town. We have wetlands, we want to preserve them for the future of generations.
It's definitely the spirit of the law.
The spirit of it, it's not written
Yes.
in bold type that way, but I think making it more difficult for the applicant, not easier for the applicant to go into the wetlands. And then piece by piece, you dismantle the wetland over time. You know, it's sort of death by 1,000 cuts, and all of a sudden you look around and say, where does the wetlands go? I think that was the intention of this law originally. Not to make it easier for the applicant to get in and do things in there. Look, we'd always not hurting anything, and the next one. It was the opposite intent of this law, and the persons who reviewed it felt it should have gone further at that time. The other towns have gone further in that going, and as I said, that person is Steve Marino, who you all know. So that's what I always look at when I look at these wetlands things. It's not what is this one thing going to do, but what is going to be the cumulative effect on this town in the future.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, that is how we need to look at it. And so we can go back to the planning board and raise concerns with the minor wetland permit. That's really the way.
Well, I'm speaking for me now. I want to make the applicant have to really work to do something in a wetland. And try to do something else first. Because once these things are done, I think you all know that, once these things are done, they never get undone. Eventually, as Shannon points out, you have the grassy lawn there that now is no longer even a wetland. It's just somebody's lawn. And all the wetland properties are basically gone. You know, and I don't think that's what the town wants to do in the end. I think the town's biggest asset is the environment that it has. And that's slowly being chipped away. When we get to the one of the applicants that went to the ZBA and the planning board, you'll see exactly that happening right before your eyes.
So I think we've got some clear guidance on comments to make back to the planning board. I'll circulate a draft of those, probably not tomorrow, but on Friday.
Thank you.
So then, turning to new business, we have Howard, Planning Board and ZBA updates.
Okay, I sent you guys a Zoom. Did anybody get a chance to look at it?
I did on the yard guard.
Yeah, the Yaga and the ZBA.
Yes, I did. I did.
I did as well. Although I couldn't hear a lot at the beginning.
Yeah, these were people who, it's not exactly our thing, but it illustrates the point of trying to preserve everything in the town as best as possible. And the ZBA may have one opinion, and in this case, it was, there were there was Paul Schwartz, who, as the former planning board chair. He was there. Please chime in, anything that you feel I'm missing or you want to add. And then there was, what's his name, Holzberg there, if I didn't the first
No,
name.
what you sent out was ZBA.
ZBA,
You were
so
at the planning board.
you weren't at the ZBA?
No.
Oh, okay. And his last one was Conway, Kyle, and the star of the whole presentation to me was Alan Rapplier, who pointed out that the ZBA was doing things that are probably legally incorrect in his opinion. And it shows that there could be a wide difference of opinion on things between the board members and members of the public or other landowners. So it emphasizes the need to be very careful with these things. What Alan had said basically that the whole application, well, you listened to it, was basically incorrect because this was a new addition to a non-conforming plot, or it wasn't an expansion of the house or anything, and that the applicant was flawed. And the planning board then went into attorney-client session at the end of the meeting. So I don't know what they talked about at that point, but it was significant enough for them to have a private session off the record.
ZBA.
The ZBA, well, the planning board does that too sometimes, so. But apparently these things are more complicated in some cases legally. So anyway, getting back to just what happened for us. Get the ZBA one. I get my notes correct in order. And where is the number? Conservation Committee. ZBA, okay. That was the one I told you about, the Yardard thing, which is becoming more complicated than it originally was because of the legal complications. It's not really anything for us. It's all zoning laws and so on. There's no wetlands involved really. The only thing that could be involved for us is, look and feel of the area. If you're a neighbor, do you want a swimming pool 14 feet away from you? And that would be sort of a man-made environment effect that would have an effect on people. I know I wouldn't want a swimming pool 14 feet away from my house and being put in if it be put elsewhere. That sort of thing. Then there was the Blakey Lynch variance. This is the ground-mounted solar panels, which was approved eventually. They still haven't thoroughly tested the view from the road in the winter because their solution was to put in just very thick hedges and stuff like that, which may not be evergreens or maybe evergreens, and they won't be able to tell fully if somebody rides by in the middle of the winter and says, oh, I could see that from the road and I don't like that. But they approved it. So the only other step to follow that would be if somebody filed a complaint. So that one is basically done. And it only involves us in a peripheral way. Again, the same thing, man-made environment sort of effect. But it really was an interpretation of the solar law, which said very clearly that it cannot be visible from the road, and that was all. And the neighbors had a right to complain, and none of the neighbors complained, if I recall. Okay, and Heather Kroner has a large amount of property on Fowler Road. She has several parcels, so she's like a huge landowner there that And on one of her parcels where her house is, she wants to enlarge the house so she can live downstairs more. So she's older and it's harder for her to walk up and down stairs. So she wants to put an addition on the house, a ground floor addition, to make it easier for her to get around in her house. She didn't show up, so it's still ongoing. If anybody's familiar with that property, it's by Canoe Hill Road and Fowler Road. It's a huge amount of property there. It's right opposite little next neighbor is the IES a little further down the road in town of Washington Gun Club. So it's really a large open parcel of land. And I don't know, where that one's gonna go. It's doesn't seem like it's gonna affect too much. Nobody has looked at that I know of, has looked at the wetland applications. Are there hydric soils there? Are there any specific animal plants in that area that could be endangered? But it doesn't seem to be a big thing at the moment. So that was that. She has to come back before and they'll hopefully ask those questions of her at that point. And the last one was what we talked about earlier on this proposed modification to the wetlands law. These people want to put a garden shed in an area that's a wetlands area, small garden shed. And the ZBA didn't see any harm to that, so they approved it. And that's done. I think they've done that once before, by the way, with somebody with a very small garden shed. And if memory serves me correctly, and I could be wrong, maybe some of you remember, I think if you have 100 square feet or less, it's up to the zoning administrator to approve
It is,
Yeah.
there's a provision in the zoning law that for it's 100 square feet, the zoning.
It doesn't even have to come before.
That's right.
So
And it's in the wetlands.
Not sure what this was. This was over in about 2 minutes. So I don't know exactly how big this was, but they approved that. It's a small shed for something or other.
But is it in a wetlands area?
I think it's in a buffer or something.
Buffer.
Yeah. And this is sort of the paradox of people saying no harm. Will they actually qualify to say that? I'm not going to say one way or another.
Mhm.
But this is the paradox of having that language in there. Yes, it was easy for those people, but on the other hand, what about the next guy and the next guy and the next guy? And pretty soon, you have sheds all over the place and buffers,
Mhm.
which I don't know if people want the town to look like that or not. If that's the purpose of these laws, to protect the town that we have. That's the judgment call, I suppose. So now, the other one that you missed was, I think, the town board,
Mhm.
December 14th, town board.
Right.
Most of that was usual stuff until we got to Mike Murphy. Mike Murphy has a wetlands update, which I think you were involved with. Some people said he was involved in meeting with you, right? You met with him? Somebody met with him
No, I did not.
on writing the update to the provisions that will be in the wetlands law. All right, so we don't have that then. Short-term rental draft. He's presenting the short-term rental draft at that point, and at the next meeting, which is going to be the reorg meeting, separate meeting again, on the 10th, I think it is, and on the 11th is the town board meeting. So he has an updated version of the short-term rental law again. And if the town accepts that, they could at that meeting or the next meeting that they have, which could be the next day, approve it. So it seems to be moving along pretty quickly. It's got, again, nothing directly from us in terms of, except that it has to, it can supersede, this is the part I don't like, it can supersede other laws of the town. So does that mean it can supersede and go into a wetlands in some way? I'm not sure if they took that out or not, but there was a section in there about superseding the other laws. The village has that section in. the village is a lot more restrictive than the town, which is odd because the village is more commercial than the town. You think they'd be less restrictive. And then Granicus, which is the agency that will be running everything. Mike had originally said that if we don't get it done in December, we'll lose the bonus. He now said that if we get it done next year, there will be a bonus again, working with Granicus. They discussed the village going into executive session to update the contract with the village. And for recreation, which is again, probably not us. And then there's Councilman Leslie Heaney reporting on the code update, NRI, planning board, and CAC, which you know all about. So nothing new for us there, but general report. Rockford reported on the ZBA, which is us, so it just basically said what we were doing, and nothing more significant than we already talked about. And that brings us to planning board again, which met yesterday. This is the interesting one, I think, for people who live in the area. Timothy and Jonah Clear, and this one is on 515 Woodstock Road, 515. And if you might remember, we had a 345, I think it was, Woodstock Road. That the guy that wanted to put his shed into the buffer area where the lake was, so he could fish closer to the lake. And he had an attorney from New York City that had all nice pictures of the house. I was there already, and what we're going to do to the house to make it better, you know. And then somebody, one of the boards, took a drive up there, and the house was torn down without a permit, which complicated everything because you can't, and not conforming. So once it was gone, it was gone. But the area got looked at very carefully, and it has quite a lot of environmental impacts in that area. This particular one is 100 acres or 90 acres. I think it's a 90.87 acre parcel. And it's very similar to the one that we looked at several years ago with lots of natural resources and so on, and wetlands. And there was a rather large number of people. I got there a little late and I said, oh my God, this room was filled with people. David was there. And I said, well, why are all these people here? It turns out they were probably neighbors of this Mr. Clear. Because once that was done, they all left. It was kind of funny. There was only 2 people left in the room. And
Essentially, that one was, as I recall, a 90-acre parcel. They wanted to carve out a 5-acre piece with a house on it because they had a buyer for it, and then divide the balance into 4 parcels, 2 on one side of Woodstock Road and 2 on the other.
you know, that's why they had
No additional building.
the one with the house and parcel was non-conforming the way they had it laid out for some reason. I don't know why they did that, but they had enough land, and they had to go before boards for that. Otherwise, it's kind of like the Johnson property, which they just sort of took a map and drew lines on it, which is what they did here. And we tried to say to them at the time the Johnson property was going up, that maybe you should have Hudsonia or somebody look at this first so that you're not chopping up major ecological systems on different properties, which will be much more difficult to regulate because then you have to regulate them one at a time for each owner. And somebody on that board, I think it was a consultant, said, no, we don't do it that way because they're not building anything at this application at this moment. So they're allowed to then draw these lines on the map. Even hypothetically, this didn't come up, but even hypothetically, if it went to a Blanding turtle area, which is I think the Blanding turtle is the one that's protected. So you could actually have it habitat on 3 or 4 properties and the way they drew the map. And then each owner could do a little bit of something and the whole thing would then be destroyed eventually. So this is the same thing again. They just basically drew lines on the map where they wanted it. And the people who lived in the area were concerned, obviously, but it's going forward. All they need to do is get something from the county, because some of it's on a county road, so they got a county approval, and it's gonna come back next time. They called it a type 2 action, again, so all they're doing is drawing lines on a map at this point. But at some point, those lines become reality. And then it's kind of too late to go backwards. And we had asked them not to do it that way, but they decided to do it that way before, and we can't get them to change their mind now. Every time and this, by the way, is a very old piece of property. It's a historic farm. Goes back a long ways, so we're gonna lose that now.
They opened a public hearing last night and they kept it open for next month as well.
Yeah, not done yet, but it looked very much like it was done. It looks like it was a formality. They didn't have the town and stuff like that. Not the town, the county reports in yet. But the real shame of this is one of these really large pieces of environmental land that's going to be no more. And once that's subdivided, they can still come back for more subdivisions on it, because it's a 5-acre zone. So you could theoretically see where this could go. And all that environmental material on there will be lost because they didn't do the study originally. The historical value of that property will be gone. And, I personally just wasn't that happy. But the man's got a right to do what he wants with his property, the way the law is written, and he's doing it. And we, the CAC, on the checklist that the consultant puts out, if you've seen the consultant's checklist, we are not involved on the checklist.
Yeah, because Aaron says they don't need any permits yet because they're not building.
Yeah,
That
that's
they will
exactly
in the
the
future if they
point.
decide to do anything. So yeah, I mean,
But at some point, after
Yeah.
it's much less environmentally attractive and sensitive, we may get involved. That's what they're saying.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's a good thing. I think our role is to tell them that they need to see what they've got as a whole first and then proceed from there. I don't know how to go about changing that, because a lot of the boards, in my opinion, are not that interested in that. So if anybody has any suggestions, I think it's an important issue. I think maybe we should be raising it again. That we have to, you guys that did the NRIs and everything, you have, those big parcels around, I think we want to preserve them as best as possible.
I mean, you can't
Why become
force a
Pleasant
private
Valley?
owner to preserve it or even to let you on to look without more information. Like if there was an endangered animal on there or an endangered plant.
Well, exactly.
Then you
This
could do
90
something,
acres
but-
presently before, nobody knows what's on there. Except, my hearsay and, empirical knowledge was used in the area. But there's no real report on what's on that property. And once you start subdividing it, afterward, that's a little late.
Yeah, that's probably true for all the big estates. And right now there's not an effective law to
Stop
stop
subdividing.
it.
Well, there should be something, because those estates are what makes this place different and special. Once we lose those, we're just another town someplace.
It's true that we've been very reliant on private landowners for a long time.
I always say to people, they say, what business do we have in Millbrook? What's your industry? I said, we have an industry. That's our industry. They provide the foundation for the town.
It does seem, and this may be not even relevant if the areas are big enough, but there's wetlands that run through this area, and it does seem that each of the lots should at least have to have some.
He did have a map,
Ratio
by
of
the way, but
area.
there's a lot of wetlands on that property.
There are.
There's a big map that they did the
Yeah.
pyramid on. At the previous meeting, he didn't have that, and I raised the question, where's your map and so on. So they came up with a quite detailed map. And a lot of big wetlands, big ones. You don't see the small ones though.
Yeah.
That's where Sony would have come in, or whoever they hired. They would have got the bogs and the wet vernal pools and all that stuff would have been mapped. It's
And it
not
does seem
there.
like new lots should have to prove that they've got a building area of some sufficient size that will not infringe on the wetland
Yeah,
buffers.
exactly.
But I don't think that's
But
currently,
before you draw the lines on the map that they did right now, that stuff should have been part of the analysis of where you do the boundaries when you subdivide it.
I'm sure they had a plan behind where they chose the 5 acres.
There's a farm there. The reason that one parcel there is it's an existing old farmhouse there. But it has some nonconformities, maybe it's too close to the road, I don't know what it is, but they carved out that property which was built there and are selling the 5 acres off, and they have a buyer. That's the only reason that the property is probably even there, because that's a nonconformity. I think otherwise they simply would have submitted it. I don't even have to submit a map. Beyond, like, know for sure. I don't think you do. I think it's just a small map, just a small basic subdivision with the lines on it when you subdivide big properties, if there's nothing else involved. All right, then the last one, taking more
If I
time.
may just add one bit of information to that, you're talking about dividing the properties. Bear in mind that you've got, what's left is 2 and 2 with Woodstock Road going between. So they are, so it's really two properties out of 1 and 2 properties out of 1 that are already divided by Woodstock Road.
Yeah, they're very similar to the other one we looked at.
Or I don't know when you're referencing.
Well,
as
it's
far as the
relatively
other one.
recent. The guy that wanted to fish there next to the pond, he took down the house, and now
I
that's
remember the
David would talk.
discussion. of it.
These are 20 acre parcels, so,
Roughly.
Yeah.
Roughly. So they could probably put 3 or 4 subdivided parcels on each of them, and pretty soon you'll have a mini development there, possibly. Possibly.
Well, the public hearing is still open on it.
Yes, it's still open only because they haven't heard back from the county yet. That's the main reason it's still open. That always happens. The county has like 30 days because it's on a county road or something, and they have to wait. Theoretically, once in a while they don't wait, but they have to wait for the county report to come in. And I'm pretty sure we'll see that this will be done by next meeting. Okay, this one I'm not quite sure exactly where it is. I believe it's in the old Fletcher Coddington place. This is Joel Kaplan, who is listed here. He was there. 2 people were there with that, a man and a wife, I believe, and they want to use that building for woodworking or floors or some wood project, some internal. It's all internal. They want a hardwood show or some sort of a business type use of that, which is what they're doing with that building. The only external thing would be the parking lot. They may want to modify the parking lot slightly. And just think of the Coddington business with something else inside is what it was. And it had no effect on what they're doing on us. Nothing environmental. I do SECA. That's, am I leaving out stuff there for that one?
When I read the application, I thought that they were saying they were not doing any woodworking on premises.
No, that was their business. That's some sort of business
Yeah,
development,
but it would
hardwood,
be a
stuff like
showroom
that.
for
A
flooring.
showroom, stuff like that.
I read that too.
So there's really nothing going on.
I didn't realize it was Fletcher's building you were talking about.
Well, I
wasn't
looked
sure
it up
where
on
they
Parcel
were.
Access.
I know
Like
it
it's
was in
building.
Nabbitsville somewhere.
In
but I wasn't
Nabbitsville.
sure.
That's it. The other thing is, for some reason, I don't know if I mentioned this or not, the Zoom meeting for that one, there's a Zoom meeting for that one, which I didn't send you. But the town board page doesn't have these meetings for some reason. but Zoom has them. So they had trouble with their Zoom meeting, and the people who went couldn't participate. They couldn't talk, or something was wrong. But but if anybody wants to look at the meeting, it was recorded somehow and it's on YouTube already. So if you want to take a closer look at, Mr. Clear here, what he had to say, his representatives, it's on that. Which I don't know why, if they could do that, why can't we have that meeting too? Nice if we looked at it ahead of time if you wanted to. But it's not on the town website. So it's not posted, and there's no link sent to anybody that isn't the link to that meeting. That's all. I mean, nothing else that I can think of that happened there. Just the most interesting thing is Mike Murphy will be at the reorg meeting with his STRs again. I don't think anybody in the town knows that who might be interested in that. Because there's no way for them to know. It was mentioned briefly at the last board meeting. So this is the problem. We don't have a paper. This is, there's no newspaper. There's not, nobody knows what's going on. I'm sure there are people who would like to attend that meeting.
What meeting did you say he was gonna present to that?
Okay, let me put it in context. The next town board meeting is the 11th officially, and it's on the website.
Mhm.
They have a reorg meeting, and I'm not sure where they reorganize, they appoint people and stuff like that, different things. They normally do that at the beginning of the year, very early, so they can get on with the functions with the new people. So this reorg meeting is going to be on the 14th. At that meeting, Mike Murphy said, well, let me present my STR stuff as well. It'll be less work for the next meeting. What that means that nobody's going to know he's doing that, what he's presenting. And the only person that might have coverage of that is the person from Milton, that Judith Balfi, that comes to some of the meetings that has paper access. And I don't know what you can do about it, because I think the only thing that says that they have to post a notice of it somewhere in the town hall, or maybe the Poughkeepsie Journal or something, which means that 99% of the people who live in this town, I would say, if I was betting on this, have no idea that the STR thing is coming up on the 14th. And so nobody will be there to comment on it. I could be wrong. Maybe somebody's spreading the word somewhere.
So he's presenting it and there's no approval. He's just,
On the 11th, or did you mean the 14th?
And I said for the 10th. The 10th. Something else is on the 14th. The dates are the 10th is the reorg meeting, and the 11th is the regular town board
Regular
meeting.
meeting, so it's the 11th that the STR is expected.
No, it's the 10th.
10th.
It's the meeting where they normally appoint new people and other things, that is reorganization of the government, so to speak, And they don't do any other business at it normally. Isn't
that kind of a swearing in for the new year?
Yeah, swearing in
all
of
the
people.
people who are going to be serving.
Yeah, it's stuff like that.
Remember Mary Alex coming in here to swear everybody into COC. So I think it may relate to that.
But the point is that normally at that meeting, it happens very quickly in the very beginning of the year, which, well, I guess I don't know, maybe the 10th is considered the beginning. And that's basically what they do. Very few people from the public come to those meetings anyway.
It's not on the calendar. It's not on the 10th. On the
It's
10th, the
the
only
10th,
thing
I
on
know.
the calendar is the recreation
And the
committee.
regular meeting is the 11th, which may be on the calendar.
The 11th is on the calendar, but it's not on the 10th.
No, I'm pretty sure that's.
I'm just saying it's not posted. So you're right, people wouldn't have any way of knowing that there was anything going on for town board on the 10th.
No, I don't like the rest of you. I've talked to several people just in casual conversation. I had no idea what the SDR thing even is in this town. You have no paper. We used to have a little paper here for people to read. So my neighbor, for example, doesn't know anything about this, has no idea what's going on. This is, this is not our business, but it's very disturbing that there's no way for people in this town to find out things easily. Unless you're very conscientious and you subscribe to some things that I'm on some list for the town that I signed up for, and I get some notices from the town, a mailing list that the town mails out for people, and the village has one. People in the village who want that, but that's it. All right, that's also it for me. So what else we have on the agenda?
I think that's it on the agenda.
Any other news?
Any other items?
No other news? Anything coming up?
No, then we've got our next meeting on February 7. Motion to close?
Motion to close?
Okay. Meeting closed.
Thank you.
Thank you for chairing it.
Does anybody have